Hello, and welcome to Team Franco Bodybuilding Podcast. This is episode number 4, and I am Joe Franco. And today we're going to discuss how to start a diet. Now, if you know me and what my philosophies are, I am a fan of counting macronutrients, and there are many ways of dieting, and that's the one that I do favor because I'm also a fan of balance and flexibility, where you need to learn that all foods are okay. And the word diet, in a sense, to me, is a dirty word because there's so many gimmicks out there and quick fixes that can actually work for the first few weeks, but it doesn't teach you anything. So I can go on and on, but how to start a diet. And when I say diet, again, I am just referring to the way that you eat. Not necessarily you have to lose weight or gain muscle. And what I really want to get across today is the most important factors whenever you start any kind of diet plan is structure and consistency. And even with like new clients that I start working with me, I remind them you have to be consistent. And I'm going to say this for any diet or anything, whatever you may be following, if it's keto or if it's vegetarian or whatever the new thing is that's going on that I tend not to pay attention to anymore, is that you need to be consistent with it. You need to give it time, because if you don't give it time, you're not going to learn. And I could tell you stories. I mean, I've had people in the past years ago, I give them a macro plan. They are consistent, and a matter of days will go by. That's it. Days, 3 or 4 days. Hey, Joe, it's not working. And I'm scratching my head. And I'm like, listen, you need to give it more than a few days. At least give it a week. I prefer at least 2 weeks, so then we can gather data and a greater sampling to learn how it works. Now, depending on how it works, all depends on what you did before you started the diet. So people will come to me and I need to learn what their background is. And if someone who's been inactive, exceedingly eating a lot, then it's a pretty easy case that you just want to focus on consistency with something that is not going to kill them at first, but to build their confidence up, to allow them to build the structure up. So therefore, it'll be an easy transition when it comes to reducing calories over time. In some other cases, and I see it more now, unfortunately, and I think it's just because of the way life is with social media and more pressures in life, is that sometimes people will constantly undereat, and then there's metabolic adaptation, which simply means your body is slowing down because it's not getting enough food from doing too much activity, from not eating enough, so your body will slow down. And then there's another phenomenon, which I think it's been proven, is that when you have too much stress and anxiety, sometimes again your body will slow down and conserve because you're putting your body under additional stress. So therefore it's a system that your body needs to hold on. So therefore, again, with that example and the example of people who overdo it and always yo-yo dieting, you need to learn how many calories one can take in, only because you're not going to be able to diet off of those low amount of calories that you have been taking in. So you want to build a cushion up. It's sort of what I like to do when someone wants to compete and they're in relatively good shape, and I'll be like, listen, let's use the first 2 months or so to see how many calories we can drive in without you really gaining unnecessary body fat. Because this way, 1, we learn what your body can handle. 2, you're going to help performance. And 3, it will give you a better cushion, more calories to start off to reduce rather than a smaller number and just try to push it and destroy you. So consistency is super key. no matter what the situation may be. You need to be consistent day in and day out, because that's how you learn how your body's going to respond. Now, if you don't have a coach, or if you're not even, thinking about competing, all these principles apply where you want to build the consistency up to learn what is best for you. And if you have a coach, it's only going to help the coach learn. Now, the next important thing with consistency to me is that you need some structure. And I think that is why people gravitate to diets, or, the latest diet book or diet trend, that they think it gives them structure. Like that's why people like the keto diet, because it gives me structure. I don't eat carbs, and then bingo, things are going to happen. Or, back in my day as a child, there was, the cabbage diet or this diet, whatever it is, it gave someone structure to follow because it eliminated food groups. So I get that part. But also I'm not a fan of eliminating food groups, as you know, because I'm all about balance. So the structure that I like to bring is obviously through macronutrient counting. But then again, some people lose sight of that because they'll wing it throughout the day and just try to hit their numbers by the end of the day. Some people can do that. They have that discipline to do so. But the structure when it comes to counting macros is that you need to plan your meals out. You need to learn and have so many meals per day that will give you that number that your goal may be. So say 150 grams of protein, 175 grams of carbs, 40 grams of fat. By the end of the day, you're going to be hitting those targets through the meals that you plan. So therefore, it takes personal responsibility for you to structure your meals so you're not second guessing and you're going to hit it by the end of the day. Now, where the flexibility part comes in, once you build up that structure, then you can teach yourself, instead of having, chicken, broccoli, and rice for my dinner, I'm going to have fish, string beans, and sweet potato. So that's where the flexibility comes in, where you can change up those food groups and mix and match and whatnot. But I think in the beginning, when you start a macro plan, you need that structure to hold yourself accountable, have the responsibility to then lead to the consistency. So the process may take a little bit longer, but it's not going to be a diet. It's not going to be restricting food groups per se, where the diet term in itself just means the way that you eat and not necessarily determines the goal. Now, sure, if your goal is to compete or to lose body fat, then it's slowly reducing some of these macros over time. So how to start a diet all starts with consistency. You have to be consistent no matter what. Then you need to build that structure to allow yourself to be consistent and have the patience along with it. Those are the things that I like to preach. And I think I'm making this podcast because I had a few of those questions, started a couple of new clients this week. So therefore, I'm going to refer them to listening to this, and anyone in the future will have access to this. And if you are listening to this for the first time or just looking for advice, I think this is the way to go. Now, another thing where people have trouble with when it comes to structuring or whatnot, they say, what should I eat? Again, it's personal preference, but I think there are some foods out there that can be part of your diet that are easier to use. Because again, in today's day and age, people are always on the run and like, Joe, I don't know what to eat. I don't have the time or to plan out foods. Well, don't make it so difficult. You don't have to make your food so fancy and all these crazy recipes and just, first you want to have that balance, but you also want to learn that, I need to figure out what my meals are going to be, and it's, for easier choices. So I have a quick list that I'm going to share with you for easy foods to use that you can use every day, and don't be afraid to change it up, and don't be afraid to have fancy meals and whatnot if you're into calculating. But to get started, to help with you be more consistent, to help with the structure, these are the types of foods that I always recommend and I personally use. So for example, protein sources. Well, that's pretty easy. I mean, you can have any kind of lean turkey, chicken, lean beef, pork, fish, eggs, whey protein. Cook a whole bunch up front, weigh it out. It's not that difficult. Another one that's often overlooked is lunch meat. Now, you can get leaner cuts of turkey and chicken and roast beef and simply measure them out. So there's really no excuse for finding good sources of protein that are on the go. It just takes a few minutes. For example, I did a month or two ago about what my diet is. And if you listen to that podcast, and I highly suggest you do, you'll see how simple it can be. Now, for carbohydrates, again, real simple ways of getting carbs in that doesn't really take a lot of time to measure or count are, believe it or not, slices of bread. It's pre-counted. Fruit is good to have. So don't listen to that bullshit about I need to avoid fruit. Fruit has plenty of health benefits and it's easy to count. Things like rice cakes, it's rice, it's preserved or whatever, but still it's an easy way to count. And then you can get into the other foods that I think are also easy to count, are like sweet potatoes or yams or regular potatoes, and you don't have to bake them. I learned a trick of just wet them down a little bit, poke holes, wrap a paper towel, throw them in the microwave, and then depending on the size of the sweet potato, 5 to 8 minutes, and then it's set for you. And then you weigh it out. Then you can get into like the rices, the pastas, obviously vegetables, and all other sorts of, carbohydrate foods. But the easy ones, again, it could be bread, rice cakes, sweet potatoes cooked in minutes, fruit. That's the ones that I typically use that are just easy. And then you get into the fats. Well, a lot of times, a lot of these foods that you're having with proteins have naturally reoccurring fats. But if you need to add fat, a variety of nuts are easy to count. Almonds, peanuts, cashews. I mean, they all have different, nutritional values and fat intake, but also, healthy oils, throw on top of salads. Peanut butter, obviously, is a choice of many. So there are a lot of options of foods. You need to figure out what works for you and what you want. Pre-plan your meals. Like, make up your own meal plan. I mean, I know coaches do this, meal planning. And on occasion, I have when those really struggle. But I want people to be responsible and not to feel like they're on a diet, where they can pick the foods that they want, because that's going to lead to greater consistency, obviously. Instead of me telling them to eat this, no, you should eat what you want. That builds up the consistency, and then it's up to you to build up that structure to have, 3 meals a day with a couple of snacks, or 5 meals a day, or whatever it is. And as long as you're hitting your numbers at the end, then you're a success, and you're going to build that data up, where when you're building the data up, you're going to learn. Whether you have a coach or not, you're going to learn, and you have to give it time and patience, where you can give it a good week. All right, body weight stayed the same. You know what? I'm feeling better, so let me write it out another week so I have more data and a greater sampling. And then if your goal is to lose body fat and your metabolism is in a good place, then you just shave off a few calories. Maybe shave off 100 calories and then go another week. Don't be in a rush, because another factor is that sometimes you need to look at all the time that built up to your current body weight and what happened in your life. So therefore, when you start this diet, start this new plan of eating, you got to say, you know what? Over the last 3 years, I was a freaking mess. My body went through this. I went through all these crazy things. I gained 30 pounds. So you need to give it some weeks to get into the groove and then build up the consistency. And don't think things are going to happen in 30 days. So those are things that you need to remind yourself. Take it one day at a time. Focus on the consistency, the structure, have patience, and then enjoy the process as it comes. So that's a quick little how to start a diet, little podcast information that I want to put out there. And if you have any questions, interested in coaching, hit me up. This is what I do. I work with a good amount of people who just want to look good, to those who want to compete at all different levels. But the philosophy is really the same. The major difference between a competitor entering a contest compared to someone who just wants to lose a few pounds is obviously the aggressiveness at the end of the diet. That's really it. Don't let anyone fool you. It's just a matter of maybe spending more time in a caloric deficit so you lose additional body fat. And that's a whole nother podcast where that's not the healthiest thing, but that's a goal someone wants to achieve, to look, so they're going to go for it and push it through. So whatever the case may be, any questions or concerns, hit me up at fitfranco@verizon.net. Check me out on Facebook, Instagram under Team Franco Bodybuilding, and have a great day, guys.